Before we begin the show today, we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are recording. I am Holly, I am recording on the land of the Ngunnawal people, and Jenna is recording on the lands of the Darug and Gundungurra peoples.
It's really important when listening to the show to keep in mind the perspectives of the voices you're listening to. So Holly and I are both cisgendered, we're both white, we're both like ridiculously good looking, and all of these things.
That definitely marginalizes
maybe not that
us.
last one, but
yeah.
It does. It's hard. Yeah. It's hard for us to be so attractive. But my point is all of these things, really colour our experiences. And obviously we are always only speaking from our own perspective. And we are talking about an industry that sits at the intersections of so many margins. So just, always keep that in mind. And particularly when talking about things like language, like there's a massive privilege that we both have that we can sit here and say, we don't want you to use this word and we don't like that word, but we do, there's privilege in that. So we acknowledge that and we just want to make sure you keep it in mind, which is why we're always raving on about this. Welcome to Somebody You Love, or The Sale of Two Titties. I'm Jenna Love.
And I'm Holly Hart.
And we're experts in disappointing our parents, breaching community guidelines, and banging the people who vote against our rights.
Jenna has left me a note here to give you guys a little content warning. This episode does contain the use of pejorative, stigmatised, shitty language like the P word, which you might find triggering, you might find upsetting. If you do, then this is not the episode for you. But if you can hang on, I think that there are a lot of interesting points that we're going to discuss today about that language and about why it is harmful, and you'll vibe with it.
Yeah, hopefully.
I hope so. But don't let us hurt you. We're giving you the warnings, okay? We love you. Be careful.
Yeah, look after yourself, babes.
Be gentle. Self-care.
Did that sound sarcastic? I'm
no.
trying to be nice.
No, I
Genuinely.
think we're sincere.
Yeah,
I think
look
people
after
know that
yourself.
we're just a
I
little
think
bit.
we are.
We're a bit weird, but we mean well.
Yeah.
And if they don't, if people think we're assholes, we're never going to fucking please them anyway. So we'll do our best.
Very true. Mm-hmm. That's true. We will not convince them otherwise because it's, there's probably an element of truth in it.
Yeah.
So I think it's super important. Like, we're going to talk about language, and this is something we've touched on this topic heaps of times in the show. And I keep saying to Holly, I've got to write an episode about that. And I keep putting it off. And, I think people get quite funny around language. I guess, like, I just want to be clear that, like, Holly and I know both of us, we kind of bonded over this early on in our relationship, our hatred of the P word, and how it, how much it pisses us off when people who know better continue to use it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're both also very reasonable. And I think that, like, ignorance is, in a lot of cases, not an excuse. But in this one, like, if you don't know, that's fine. We've both gone in on, I've seen comments Holly's made, and I make them all the time. I made a promise to myself that when I saw the P word, and I'll say it for the first time now in the episode, we're talking about the word prostitute or prostitution. I made a promise to myself that when I saw that word used or heard it used, that I would say something. But, I'm always trying to do that just with the intention of educating.
Sure.
Like, I'm never going, you used the wrong word for me and you need to be cancelled and you should feel awful about yourself. And every time, I've been like, hey, it seems like you're not aware, but this is actually a slur, we get a lot of questions about why it's considered a slur. And on the one hand, part of me is like, well, why do we need to explain that? Like, there's this little part of me that's like, if somebody tells you that something you're doing hurts them, do you demand an explanation as to why, or do you just stop doing the thing that causes harm? Like, if somebody says to me, when you say that, it hurts me, I'll be like, okay, I won't say it then. I might make mistakes. That's fine. We all make mistakes. But, like, for the most part, I'm kind of like, well, I don't understand this, like, extreme aversion to, like, people call it language policing, but we're just trying to explain
I disagree.
how things make us feel.
I have to disagree with it as a generalization. as a generalization, I sort of think like we have to clarify, or I would like to clarify how I feel in regards to that. I think from people within a community is very different from those without. So I think...
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. But if somebody tells you something hurts them, do you just not do it? Well, sometimes people tell you things hurt them and I just don't think it's valid. My example here, which is very personal, is that I'm allowed to speak to my own fatness. I'm allowed to call myself fat. I'm allowed to call myself a whore. I'm allowed to, I believe that within my marginalised communities, I can speak on my experiences with the terminology that I like. And I feel like there are a lot of people within these communities who are desperate to police people within the community on how they speak. And I don't think that's valid. I think them saying, oh, your language hurt me is just really shitty. It's misdirected. It's misguided. And if you're offended by people within that community having their own experiences with that marginalisation, then you're just compounding that marginalisation. You're not taking on the oppressors. You're just stepping on the people within that group. So I just wanted to clarify that because I don't want anyone to be listening and thinking, well, yeah, you can't say that you would stop saying or that you'd change your mind about something that you said because someone says they're hurt. And historically, Holly, you've not done that. Well, no, I haven't, because I don't agree that when people within a community speak for themselves that's a place to police people. I don't think policing in general is what we want to do with it. I think people within a marginalised community, letting people know outside of that community that the language that they'd like to be referred to, I think that's valid. But yeah, I just had to make that point very clear.
Well, yeah, I 100% agree.
Yeah.
I didn't realise I was saying other than that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I don't think you were
definitely
saying other than that.
like...
But yeah, I just don't want anyone to hear that and me go, yeah, totally, Jenna. And people go, well, Holly, actually, I'm familiar with you not doing that. So I don't want to be ever hypocritical.
It's just always really interesting to me when, you say to somebody, hey, that word's actually considered a slur and sex workers would prefer you to use the term sex work. And then there's just this they get wildly offended, they lose their shit and they come back and they're like, oh, I can't say anything anymore. You can't call a spade anymore, blah, blah. There's just all this real reactionary And it's you in my opinion, you can say whatever fucking word you want.
Yes.
But the thing is, I've told you it hurts.
Yeah.
So you're going to continue to be hurting. And that's fine. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. But I'm just saying, I'm going to think you're an asshole.
Yeah.
So there's that comedian. I saw the It's So Hard podcast shared. The comedian is Taylor Tomlinson. And she said, calling a sex worker a prostitute is like calling a comedian a clown. You're not technically wrong, but you are a fucking asshole. So,
yeah.
And it's like, sure, if you want to insist on using that word, if you need to cling to that word for some reason,
it is about intent,
cool.
Isn't it?
It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's fine if you want to be an asshole.
Yeah.
It doesn't really bother me.
Yeah.
But I'm just telling you for your own sake.
Yeah, you're giving somebody the opportunity to be better.
Yeah. But it seems people really don't want that. And I can understand that they feel policed. But I think that when it's done in a way where it's not policey, you don't get to say that word. That's aggressive, But saying, oh, just a reminder that the P word is a slur and the preferred term is sex worker. Why are you so emotional about me saying that to you?
Yeah, what does it mean
What's
to
going
you?
on there?
Why is that? Yeah.
It's fine. Yeah. And I'm sure plenty of our listeners will just disagree with us on this one. A lot of people say, what is the harm? Really, how do words actually hurt someone? And I know there's also a school of thinking around, we should be focusing on greater harm. We should be focusing on actual violence, physical violence against sex workers, not getting bogged down in these little bits of harm. But I strongly believe that the two are very connected.
Oh, absolutely.
And it really is my opinion that continuing to use language that's dehumanizing makes people think that we're not human and thus violence can be committed against us. I really see a connection with that, and I don't think everyone does, but I do.
No, I agree. I think it definitely makes us more prone to violence, and then it being treated as less of a serious offence. So Yeah, language does have an effect. And you see that with lots of communities that have slurs used against them, that the minute that respect is taken away, that language is respect, and that has a big impact.
Of course it does. I don't buy this argument that language doesn't matter.
Oh,
like, I don't buy it.
No, yeah.
Language does. What are you talking about? Of course it does. It's only that it's language that's upsetting a community that you don't think matters.
That's what it comes down to, doesn't it? 100%.
Yeah.
It's that you don't care about that community, and so you don't care that it affects people. You don't see that as a valid concern.
But then don't use any words to describe us.
Yeah.
That's also an option.
Yeah.
If you don't care about sex work at all, just stop talking about it.
Yeah.
You know?
Does remind me a little bit of that thing where Scott Morrison, our former Prime Minister, sadly, or fortunately that it's former, was talking about women and sexual abuse and stuff like that. And he was saying, oh, well, my wife said to me, what if it was my daughter's sort of thing? And it's a thing that so many people just don't really care about the hurt that is being caused until they can relate it to their own circumstances or people around them. And that's a whole thing that this show is about, is reminding you that people that you don't even realise are sex workers and people that you love are sex workers, and parts of all other marginalised communities. You might not know that people around you are gender diverse and have neurodivergencies and mental health things. And if you proceed to use shitty language everywhere in your life, you just don't know. You might be hurting people that you care about, beyond just caring about society as a whole. If all you think is important is that which is close to you, you might not even realise that you are hurting people close to you.
Yeah, and you'll continue to not know that they're members of that marginalised community because they do not feel safe around you to tell you.
Yeah.
Sucks to be you. At the end of the day, it's like my mum said, you're the only one missing out.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is the problem with the P word?
Give us a lesson.
So, okay.
Teach
little
us.
Little lesson. We fully understand that language evolves, right? And as much as I feel like you and I, we're getting to the age where we can't handle that language is evolving and the kids are using things in different ways, and we're struggling.
I've always been pedantic.
But it's okay. We're still hip. Yeah, we are. Yeah,
we
both
hip.
are a little bit.
She says in a word that hasn't been cool
hip.
since the 1980s.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what you call hip anymore. I'm not hip
We're
enough to
lit,
know.
fam. Yeah.
We're lit, fam. Oh,
Yeah.
God, we're so cringy. This is okay. Now, I can imagine that some of our older listeners might sort of think, and I've heard people say this to me, and I sort of thought this a little bit when I first started doing sex work. Well, prostitution, that's just the word for what you do. That's just the word for it. And it always used to be okay. So why is it suddenly not okay now? And, we totally get that change is hard because, yes, we're starting to get to that age where it's difficult for us too. So we get it. But the thing is that the P word has never been used in a positive light or really even in a neutral light. So the first written record that we have of it in the English language is from the year 1530, where it was used as a verb meaning to sexually dishonour oneself. The first time it was used as a noun is in 1607 in Francis Beaumont's Woman Hater, where it's used as an insult.
Lovely.
So this idea that it used to be just a neutral term that just describes a certain job, and that, the social justice warriors and the snowflakes have made it this big deal out of nothing, that's really not supported by the evidence. It has been a loaded term from day one. So then towards the end of the 17th century, and we have listed all of our sources for this in the show notes, including some articles by friend of the show and creator of the Satisfaction Project, Georgie Wolfe. So do check those out. So yeah, towards the end of the 17th century, it begins to be used to describe what we now refer to as sex work. And from that point on, it is used both as an insult and as a profession, usually both at the same time. So the Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines the noun prostitute as, number one, a person who engages in sexual intercourse in exchange for pay. And number two, a person, such as a writer or painter, who deliberately debases his or her talents, as in for money. It defines the verb as, number one, to offer sexual intercourse in exchange for pay. Number 2, to devote to corrupt or unworth purposes, to debase.
Oh, shit.
So when people say to me, what's wrong with the P word? I'm like, well, look at it in the dictionary. Like, it's literally an insult.
Oh, wow.
Like, it's not.
I had no idea.
It's not that we've got this wacky new interpretation of it and we're being really precious. It's really fucking insulting. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't done the research here with the dates and examples of this, but I feel like I'm preaching to the choir already with a lot of our listeners, and I don't think you have to do much of a Google search. You can literally just type this word into Google and you will find examples of what we're talking about. But it's been used historically in the media to dehumanize sex workers and to other us, to make us not worthy. So you will see this often in articles that refer to the deaths of sex workers. Less and less these days. I will say I am increasingly seeing in news articles they're using terminology sex worker and they're treading very carefully. But as recently as, even 5 years ago, 3 years ago, and even today with some certain news outlets, they will use that word almost to minimise. They'll go, oh, well, a young lady passed away, blah, 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 and then it'll be a prostitute was killed. And suddenly that makes it less important. That makes it less sympathetic. It makes it, she asked for it. It's her fault or she's not as worthy. You notice a lot of that, the word prostitute scandalising in sensationalistic media. One of the most recent examples of that I've seen in recent media was Cassie Sainsbury, was it? The young woman who was arrested in South America with a whole lot of cocaine. And it was found out that she was a sex worker at the time, like not long before or whatever. But there was a whole lot of stuff that, she's a prostitute and just to smear her, just for sensationalism, just for scandal. And that word was used not in a good way. They weren't like, she's a prostitute and that means that she does a lot for society. No, it was used as a way to make her seem of poor moral character, basically. So these words are very rarely used in media as a way to lift us up. They're used as ways to bring us down and to make us seem invaluable. There are a lot of moral connotations with the words. As you've sort of discussed, they were used historically to describe dirty or unworthy or loose moral women who did things that were unacceptable in society by society's standards, particularly when it came to sex. I think the generations growing up today are doing a better job of separating sex from morality, which is so fantastic to see, but it's very deeply ingrained. And I think the word prostitute has a lot of that morality involved. It is not just woman who sells sex. It is, and again, it's very gendered language, but it is often woman who does bad moral things. So it being linked to that perception is really toxic. It's really damaging. And historically, it is a word that's linked with crime. Prostitutes, drugs, pimps, drug dealers, all of this terminology that is really harmful are all sort of banded together and linked in the same articles and stories and tales over time. And so often anyone who is referred to as a prostitute will be perceived as criminal or troubled person or deviant, which often is perceived as a lower class citizen, and therefore they have less value to society and we're more disposable. So it means that violence against us is taken less seriously, it's swept under the rug, it's ignored and accepted. And therefore, the sad thing is that when it is accepted by society or when people turn more of a blind eye to when sex workers are harmed, it also makes us more of a target. It means that people who are looking to hurt someone, people who are feeling like they need to lash out, they see sex workers as an easier target because they think they're disposable. They don't have as much value as a real person.
Yeah. They're not going to do as much damage, they think.
Yep.
And they're more likely to get away with it.
Yeah.
Or get off lighter. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the way, the way the word is used in legislation is a big one for me. It is used a lot in legislation. It's used by the legislative and the judicial system to hurt us, to lock us up, to separate us from families, to fine, which is just always amusing to me to find someone for trying to earn money, because I don't know how they think you're going to pay the fine. But anyway, that is just an issue that's much broader than just sex work. And it's this thing where, so I talked before about the history of it being used as a verb and a noun, and I actually didn't come across too much information about it being used as an adjective, but that is where it fucking shits me so much.
It's the worst.
It is the worst. You see it in legislation and you see it used by SWers. We've mentioned SWers before on the show. That acronym means Sex Work Exclusionary Radical Feminist. It is the left who think that sex work isn't work, and they often also, almost always, also TERFs, where they think that trans women are not women, and of course they fucking are, obviously. So the way they use it is they will say prostituted woman or prostituted women. And that, as Holly touched on, they never say prostituted men. Yeah. Never. So I don't know, I don't know what that's about.
Oh, well, women have no agency. Don't forget that we can't make decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess men can be sex workers, but women can't. We can only be prostituted.
Almost certainly.
I don't know. But that's exactly what it does. It takes away our agency. It makes it something that is being done to us rather than something that we are doing, that we are actively doing and choosing to do. And of course, the question of choice is very complex. There's all different levels of choice, and whether it's the lesser of two evils or whatever, it's still a choice, and that's really key for us.
Well said.
So, okay, these are the common arguments, because as I said, I made a promise that I would always say something. So I've seen lots of arguments against it, because again, people can't just go, oh, yes, maybe this prostitute is saying something of value and I could just shut the fuck up. Of course not. So one of the big ones is, what? Now we can't even call prostitutes. And I love this one. And I touched on it at the beginning, but it's this whole idea that it's the woke generation. And we have been asking to be called sex workers for 40 years. This is not a new thing. Just get with the fucking program. So I'm sure some of our listeners will have heard of sex worker Carol Lee, who is also known as Scarlet Harlot. She passed away last year, sadly. But she's credited with inventing the term. It was in either 1979 or 1980. She was attending this feminist conference on violence against women in porn and the media. She discovered that the sex industry specific workshop that was a part of that had used the term sex use industry. And she said this quote, "The words stuck out and embarrassed me. How could I sit amid other women as a political equal when I was being objectified like that? Described only as something used, obscuring my role as actor and agent in the transaction." So it's not a new thing, babes. Just get with the program. Depending on what you're talking about, sometimes people will say, well, the term sex work is newish, as we've just covered. It's 40 years new. And so it's anachronistic. So if this is a period TV show or book or film or whatever, it's a historical show and it needs to be accurate. So they have to use the P word. And my response to that is why? Why? I can guarantee you that this character you've written set in the 1880s London, because you can't write about that time period without writing about whores apparently, I can guarantee you that her experience as a sex worker, you've not portrayed accurately. So why the fuck does the word need to be accurate?
Yes. Yeah.
And I just don't know why it matters. It's the same argument used against colorblind casting. Oh, well, it can't be a black man. Why? We're watching a TV show, we know it's not real. The only case where that could be relevant could be in a documentary, in which case have a sex worker narrate it and then they can say the word, because nothing about us without us.
Yeah. Even then, that defeats the purpose, because if it's a documentary, we're using today's language to describe something that happened in the past. So, sorry, there's just, it doesn't make sense anyway. Yeah.
No.
Bizarre.
The only example I could think of is if there's, someone reading from a text written a long time ago. Yeah. Or in which case you can put up a little disclaimer. Yeah. That's cool.
Whatever.
I love this one.
Oh, I hate it.
hate it.
Oh, no.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, I knew that we meant the same thing. I love and hate in the same way.
But sex work could mean lots of things. It's an umbrella term. Prostitute is more specific. So first of all, okay, if you need to describe the intricacies of what's happening with our genitals, there is a term for that. It's full-service sex worker, or you may choose to say in-person sex worker if that's what's relevant, as opposed to an online sex worker. But the more important question here is, why is that necessary? Why do you need to specify?
Yeah.
And differentiate between full-service sex work and other forms of sex work.
Yeah. In what circumstance in your life are you needing to tell other people, oh, no, but the penis goes in the hole with this person? Like, oh, is it necessary?
Yes. What is that? And this came up a lot with that terrible documentary series. I think it was like a limited series, maybe Netflix, about the Cecil Hotel, about the death of Elisa Lam.
I don't think I saw it.
It was maybe a 3-part thing. Came out not too long ago. And holy dooly, if you want to get drunk, play, take a shot every time they say the P word and other stigmatizing language about, homelessness and drug use.
Oh, God. Okay.
But so in that show, they talked about how this particular hotel, where this poor woman lost her life, and it has nothing to do with anything other than, really sad circumstances. They go on and on about how the regular patrons at that hotel were prostitutes and drug dealers, the classic combo. And so immediately after that, there was a fair bit of discourse online where sex workers were like, guys, please, the media, just use sex work. Come on.
Yeah.
If everyday Joe Blow walking down the street who doesn't understand what the problem with the P word is, okay.
Totally.
But you're making a documentary, research your fucking shit, mate.
You got to know.
So, yeah, come on, just do some research. It's literally what? But the response from a lot of commenters were, well, no, but they can't just say sex work because we needed to know that they were prostitutes. And then I would say, why? Why do you need to know exactly the intricacies of what they were doing? And the reason is the hierarchy and whorephobia. Mm-hmm. The reason is because they would have been much more okay with it being a stripper or being a dom. Mm-hmm. The reason is they needed to know that these were workers who were putting penises inside them for the most part, and that was the point that was trying to be made. Not that it was sex workers, that it was prostitutes. And that's something, I don't need to go into why that's harmful. And they also say, oh, well, it's, sex work now means OnlyFans creator. And, Elisa Lam passed away in 2013 and OnlyFans was created in 2016. So that isn't even a question. Sure, there were people obviously doing phone sex. There were people, creating porn. But yeah, I think the big question to ask is, I think there's very few circumstances in which you would need to differentiate. Perhaps a health practitioner who wants to, no, they still shouldn't even ask. No, just leave it at that.
Yeah.
There's very few. What do you think of this one, Holly? But escorts or companions don't have sex with their clients, whereas prostitutes do. Or I've heard this one a few times, escorts choose their clients, whereas prostitutes will just have sex with anyone.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to it. No, I'm joking. Of course it's not. It's fucking balls to the wall bullshit. Are you serious? Yeah, come on. No.
Yeah. Ridiculous, babes. Ridiculous.
Nonsense.
And that's we'll get onto a bit later. Yeah. That's I get annoyed at the terms that I consider kind of euphemism because it does confuse people.
I know we're thinking the exact same thing at the moment, but it's that whole thing of, well, I'm an elite courtesan and so I only have dinner with clients and then, I'm a prostitute so I have 6 dicks in my hand at a time. Okay, you're being silly. You're all, just settle down.
Yep. So just once and for all, that's not true.
Yeah.
There's no market for a full-time sex worker who doesn't have sex with their clients. And every sex worker at every level makes choices about who they accept as clients.
Yes. Well said.
Those choices might be very limited.
Sure.
But there is always choice involved and there's always screening and decision-making going on. Oh, I've only seen this one once.
Oh, wow.
But XXX provider says that she hates the term sex work and she wants to be called a prostitute.
Wow.
And like, great, call her a prostitute then. Go nuts, babe. But like, just don't expect to not be slapped if you call another sex worker a P word, you know? Like, just that's cool. And I think this whole thing, sometimes that's used as a way to try and discredit our movement.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, you can't even agree on what you want to be called, you know? And it's like, no, it just means that every sex worker is an individual person. We all have a variety of reactions to and histories with words.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Yeah. Imagine individuals within a movement having different opinions. Oh, gosh.
I know. It's a ridiculous. It's just another attempt at discrediting, you know.
I have never heard that before. It's shocking, but it brings up something for me. My octogenarian client who passed away last year, sadly, he was very old fashioned in a lot of things, as well. I suppose anyone in their 80s probably is, but
yes,
very regularly he would use the word prostitute with me, and as a movement, I'm against the word prostitute, and I try now and then to do my bit, but generally I don't care too much. Like we've said, and it's all about intent. I guess my point is that when an 80-something-year-old is using that word, I'm not going to stress too much about it because, you know, it's more trouble and it's what you pick your battles, right? So I was, you know, whatever, and he would tell me about these other workers that he knew in Sydney, and he would say, well, you know, this girl, she doesn't like that word, but you don't mind it, do you? You're just a regular old prostitute. You do all the stuff. The girls in Sydney, they don't do the sex. They don't do the things. And I was like, they do. Like, babe. He would frequently say, well, yeah, you don't mind the word prostitute, do you? You're a real prostitute and all of this sort of stuff. And I was like, yeah, well, I am, and I don't feel any shame around the word. Like, that's fine. I'm a prostitute. But the issue isn't that I have shame around the word, and it's not that I don't mind being called a prostitute or that I want to be called a prostitute. My issue with the word is that, as we've discussed this whole episode, it's used in a broader sense to damage the community, and that's what I take issue with. Yeah. Sorry for running off on that rant, but it's just because I could see him going to people and saying, well, Holly doesn't mind being called or Holly likes to be called a prostitute. Well, I don't really, but yeah.
And the last one I've added in here is one that I've heard a few times, and it does give me pause very, very occasionally for half a second, and then I move on, which is that you two, Holly and Jenna, always say the word hooker, and Jenna even makes T-shirts that say whore on them, and it's very confusing.
Is it?
And I do understand that can be a little bit confusing, but I would encourage you to Google the word reclaim.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I have a friend who is a sex worker who I think they love the word prostitute because they refer to themselves as prostitute. They refer to their friends as one. Their 40th birthday party, it was during COVID, so it was a Zoom call, and it was a prostitutes and PowerPoint birthday party, and it was iconic. So we all had to bring our own PowerPoint presentation, and it was just the bomb. But you can just tell that, like, they use it with such love, you know, and they're allowed to do that. And it makes me feel loved when I hear them do that. I'm like, oh, I'm so happy to be one of your prostitute friends. Like, I love that. But, you know, it's, but I do, you know, I have moments where I go, oh, us putting these words everywhere can definitely be confusing. I do see that. I'm not going to stop doing it, but I do acknowledge that it can make people a bit unclear.
Sure.
I think I talked about this in our bonus episode, which is only available to our patrons, about the word hooker. I feel like a lot of the time I use it because I say the term sex work and sex worker so often because it's my job, because we have this podcast, because it's the advocacy that I do. Like, I just spend so much time doing sex work stuff. And sometimes I feel like the people around me are so sick of the sound of my voice forming that series of vowels and consonants that I just feel like I've got to form a different word. Yeah. And that's often when I say hooker, because it's a bit less serious.
Yeah,
it's a bit more
slang.
lighthearted.
Yeah.
It's, yeah. But I know that is a term that a lot of workers don't like. So I think we've talked about this. I think it's quite an Aussie word, or it's something that
feels
is
Aussie.
used a lot.
Feels a bit bogan,
in
doesn't
this country,
it?
Anyway,
Yeah,
it does. And I think maybe I've heard some American workers who are like, "Oh,
yeah,
fair enough.
Yeah,
we've all
fair.
got different experiences."
Totally. Yep.
Let's do a quick roundup of how we feel about some other terms. I just put some here. Feel free to throw in others.
Love it.
But how do you think about being called a sex worker?
Fine, neutral. No worries. Whatevs.
Yeah, I find it very neutral.
Yeah, sorry. I do want to acknowledge again that what Carol Lee has done, it's a wonderful term for legislation. It's a wonderful term for media. It's fantastic in all of those. So I'm very positive about it in that regard. But just in general, yeah, fine. No worries.
Yeah, same. Yeah. Exactly the same. I do think again, on our bonus episode, I talked about how sometimes I think it makes people think that sex is a bigger part of our job than it is.
Yes.
And I don't think that's a problem with the term. I think it's a problem with the way society views sex and views it as a very narrow thing. And also, it's not a problem with the term, because if you think about other every job title is not going to describe the extent of the job. Like a social worker doesn't spend all their job doing social. That's, so I think that, it's not the perfect term that describes everything we do.
Yeah, there are very few.
You can't do that.
Yeah, there are very few.
I think
job
it's
titles
fine,
that cover that. Yeah. I think another one is intimacy professional and things like that. And I feel again they're a little, like you said, similar path. You're giving a general idea of the job, but then I know that you personally don't like things that are a little bit too euphemistic-y, but then also maybe that's a little bit closer to our work than sex worker.
Yeah, I don't see that as euphemistic. I just see it as wanky sounding.
Okay, well, yeah, fair enough. It is a bit,
I think that is much more accurate, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I would feel a bit self-conscious describing myself as an intimacy provider.
Totally. And I also
I also don't think people would know what I was talking about.
No. I also feel like
they'd be like, you do what now?
Yeah. Then it feels also like we're not, we're trying to, what's the word? Not reclaim, or we're trying to dodge the stigma of the sex factor. No, we don't need to do that. I'm happy to be a sex worker. I'm happy for people to know that sex is involved often. So that's that part as well.
Yeah, it is. It is a part of it. It's just maybe not, it's not all of it. And that's what, What about when you hear the term consensual sex work or consensual sex worker?
Well, that's fucking silly. It's a bloody, what do you call it? Oxymoron sort of thing. No, I don't think it's an oxymoron. But no, that's silly.
It's a double, it's a redundancy.
It's a redundancy, thank you. Oh, she's so good. She's so homogenous. She's so equidistant. I love it.
Only teases me.
She's just so verbose. I love it. It's so hot.
Mean to me.
No, you're correct. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, it is. It's a redundant term because you don't need the word consensual in there because you've already got the term work.
Yeah.
And my belief is anybody that's in an industry that is not consenting to be in that industry is not a worker.
No.
They are a slave. They are a victim. Whatever.
Yes. They're
not a worker. So you don't need to say consensual sex work because sex work is the term. We've already got that covered.
Perfect.
Whore. Whore's my favourite word.
Yeah, I
love the word.
I'm very into
Big
whore.
fan.
I like it. Yeah. Again, reminder, that is our word. Please, generally, unless it's part of our agreed kink in the bedroom with some sort of dirty talk or something. I don't know. Unless we've agreed on it, let's keep that to the sex workers. But yeah, love whore. I love to use it myself.
Good one. I think it's got a really great mix of, there's history with it. It feels old school, but it's also current.
Yeah.
I just love it.
It's such a vibe.
But yeah, it is definitely can be used as an insult. So
it feels like a more powerful reclamation, doesn't it? Because a lot of us have been called it when we weren't sex workers. I think a lot of us, when we are sex workers, it feels very powerful to take that one back.
Well, that is the next conversation, right? Is what about when people say, "Oh, I'm a gossip whore," that sort of thing?
I don't mind. I'm pretty lax on that sort of stuff. I don't mind. I don't like the idea, for example, of somebody who is a slut wearing a T-shirt that says whore or something like that. That's a funny one for me. I don't mind, though, if I'm out with a bunch of friends and one of my friends says, oh, I'm such a whore, when they are a slut, I'm sort of like, no, I get it. Colloquially, I get what you're saying. But it's, there's a little line there for me where I don't know. I don't mind whore being used a little bit more by women because, again, a lot of women who aren't whores have been called whores, and there's some reclamation there as a woman of taking that language and being like, well, I own my sexuality and my, yeah, but it's an interesting one.
So I have two thoughts on this. One is that a friend of mine, this was a couple of years ago, in a group chat said something about being a gossip whore.
Right.
And I mean, I was like, same, because I would I would have sex for gossip. And then they private messaged me and they were like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't use that term, That's and I was
cute.
like, why not? Like I literally couldn't even work out what they're apologizing for.
Yeah.
And it hadn't occurred to me. And then I went, oh, okay, fair point. I was like, I'm actually so fine with it.
Yeah.
And I quite identify with that. I self-identify as a gossip whore, but that's a fair point.
Yeah.
And I agree. I feel quite uncomfortable when people use whore to mean slut. I think that's probably just a bit of ignorance or whatever. But I'm like, well, it is a specific thing.
Sure.
Like at Mardi Gras, we happen to be in the marshalling area. You're in a different order to this is the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras as well, which is very different to what Mardi Gras is in the US. But yeah, it's a pride march, basically. It's the same as pride. In the marshalling, so yeah, it's a big parade, but in the marshalling area, you're like stacked up. So you're next to different floats to who you're marching next to. So we somehow were next to the TikTok float, which was obviously like, they had these big, LCD screens. It was very fancy. And there was a few famous drag queens on that float. And a couple of us who are, really quite like drag queens, we kind of broke in and like climbed over the barrier to their float to introduce ourselves and get pics, And they were like, it wasn't a real break-in. They were fine with it. And they were like, oh, which float are you from? And we were talking to these two particular drag queens, and I won't name them, but they are very young. And I know that they got started with their drag during COVID and on TikTok. That's where they sort of became famous. And I'm clarifying that because there is a lot of crossover in the drag world with sex work because, a lot of drag queens, well, the vast, vast majority of drag queens are queer, a lot are trans, and so there's a lot of crossover in those communities. So there's history there. But, I mean, this could be a whole other episode. Drag is also full of misogyny and whorephobic stuff. Like, it's very tricky because I give them a bit of a pass because there's history there.
Sure.
But the point is that I know that these two drag queens do not have that history personally.
Yeah.
So they said, what float are you from? And I said, oh, we're the whores from next door. And they were like, oh, you're whores? Us too. And I was like, oh, you're not, though. I didn't say that. I was like, and I was like, well, you're not though, are you? Like we're literal whores.
Yeah.
And we're out here asking to be treated like human beings. And you're on the TikTok float and you make a lot of money dancing on TikTok. So, you face your own stigma being queer and being drag queens. I 100% get that. But you're actually not whores.
Definite moment. Yeah.
But also then I was like, great, let's take a selfie. Love it.
Yeah. Like we've said before, and, a big part of it is intent and a big part of it is recognising, what part of things are ignorance and when the time is to educate people and when it's not. And, it's quite complex, but, yeah.
We've talked a little bit about hooker.
Fucking love hooker. I reckon it's my favourite.
Yeah, I think it's your favourite for sure.
Probably because I'm a bit more bogan. Yeah. I'm into the hooker. And I don't mind other people using it. I actually find I'm really cool with public using it. I don't mind people going, oh yeah, I went to see the hookers, or I was friends with a hooker, and I'm really cool with hooker being used. And a lot of people aren't.
I'm not a fan of other people using it. Yeah. Companion.
Yeah, I think actually I do believe that's in my Twitter bio. I think Canberra companion.
You're a companion.
I think in that instance I put companion there because social media,
starts with C.
You don't. Well, yes. I like the alliteration, but also social media. You have to be so careful with the terms that you use to avoid being deplatformed. Generally, I think it's a bit cute. I think for me, it's a little bit of a wave to Firefly. I think there's a little bit of that, with the companions being the sex workers in that series. And I think it's really a good descriptor of what we do. Again, like you've said with some of the words, it's a little bit wanky, but primarily that is what my job is. I actually had a booking earlier today, and the client and I were talking about, human needs and the need for connection and intimacy, and how he said that that's why he comes to see me, is to tick that box, and that's really nice. And actually, it was really sweet. God knows if he's going to listen, but I've only seen him a few times. But he said at the end of the booking, I'd pay just for the conversation. And I said, well, yeah, I guess you have to have the sex though, don't you? But that is the rhetoric that you get from a lot of our clients, is that the companionship is the main part of it. And all the rest of the physicality is wonderful, and, I thrive on it, and it's really great. But a lot of what we offer is that constant bonding, and for all of the people who say that sex work is very transactional and there is no emotional connection and there is no, well, they're just missing out, because I think companionship is a huge part of what we do, and it's a lot of what I get out of it. I get a lot of companionship from my clients, and so I think it's a great term. It's a little, again, it's not, sometimes I really like to own the sex part of it, because I like to be like, there is no shame in it being sex, but companion I think is really good.
Yeah, I like companion because I think it really describes the job.
Yeah.
But I do have that issue with it where I feel like it's a bit euphemistic.
Yeah.
And it feels like it's a little bit trying to distance from the sex. But I think you touched on a really important point, which is that existing on the internet as a sex worker is, it's a volatile space for us, and we do have to use euphemisms. And that's not, sorry, I shouldn't have said it's on the internet for you and I, but for people that live in almost every other country in the world, it's existing in general.
Well, so true.
Is really difficult as a sex worker. Yeah. And they do have to use these euphemisms. So I guess I'd like people to know that when you see, escort and, that's not a description of a particular type of person in the sex industry.
Yeah.
Companion doesn't mean a particular thing. Sex worker doesn't. Courtesan doesn't. These words don't. They're not saying what services they offer or don't offer. It's just really fucking hard for us to continue to exist and not get our accounts shut down, So people are trying to find language that conveys what we're doing without it triggering the algorithm. So I think there's a lot of confusion around it because of that. But yeah. What about escort?
I don't mind escort. I use it a lot. It does give me sort of 90s like Yellow Pages, I don't know, Pretty Woman attempt at this, higher class. I don't know. There's something to me that's now a little bit outdated about escort for some reason, and that's probably totally my own perception there, but it just feels like you're at an agency.
It feels a bit old-fashioned to me as well.
Yeah, you're at an agency and they send you out and you have a credit card swiper, and I don't know, it just gives me this image of an old-fashioned form of sex work, and I feel like the digital age and society has just moved beyond escort as a term. But I still use it regularly, but it just doesn't feel as current.
I'm not a fan of it because I've realised just how many people think that escorts don't have sex with their clients.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Like it's a far more common view than I realised.
Wow.
And that I'm like, what? No, babes. No. So, but I do think it's the word that people understand the most.
Yes,
because when I say I'm a sex worker, they go, like OnlyFans. And I go, no. I mean, yes, but also, and then they go, like an escort. And then I say, yeah, okay, yes, that's a full-service sex worker. And then they go, but escorts don't have sex with their clients.
My
and then
goodness.
I go, maybe leave the education to me, babes, because you don't know what you're talking about. But yeah, this is, again, it comes back to why I have a problem with the euphemisms. Yeah. But of course, under criminalisation, escorts need to, quote unquote, not have sex with their clients.
Yeah, totally.
Even though I don't think that covers them in any way whatsoever. I'm pretty sure.
Got to do what you got to do.
That's not going to help you. But it's, yeah. working girl or working lady?
My favourite. I reckon that's my favourite. It's fucked. It's forum.
Fucking hate it.
It's forum filth. Garbage. I think for a lot of my early sex work career, I called myself a working girl, a working lady. And I think that was probably relevant for brothel workers back in around 2007 onwards. But these days, it's gendered language. It particularly to me just reeks of forum freaks.
I don't get it. Like working. Yeah. What?
Well,
aren't most people working?
Yeah.
I don't get why it's missing.
I gather it was
missing the type of industry. What?
Yeah, totally. I think for before Carol Lee coined her term, I believe that was the main term was working girl, but I think she said that she found it very gendered, and she was not. Yes. So then it became sex work, which was less gendered. So, but I think for a long time, working girl,
right.
And working lady was the most accepted terminology. And I think that's why a lot of these forum idiots use it, because they're stuck in these past attitudes about women and have not, for the past, 40 plus 50 years, haven't moved forward with any of their, women's rights attitudes or sex worker rights or any attitude at all.
The movie Working Girl has nothing to do with sex work.
Right.
It's a secretary.
Well, I have not seen that film. But I don't know.
Neither.
Maybe
but it's
you're the...
It's just, it's so weird.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know the history of it. You're very good at all of this sort of research and stuff, and I'm sure you will, dive down a rabbit hole and find stuff about it. But you, that's just my vague understanding, and I'm not, I'm no expert in advocacy.
That movie came out in 1988.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a movie about sex work.
No.
So I don't get... It's so weird to me.
Totally
and then,
unrelated.
of course, the gendered thing is a problem.
Yeah.
But the other issue for me is working girl.
Yeah.
This comes back to the consensual sex work thing, because if somebody's underage and they're in the industry, then, that's not the same thing as sex work. So I don't know why we're talking about girls here, for one.
Yeah.
And working lady, when did I become a member of the aristocracy? And when and how do I get out? Why am I a lady? Ew. If it's going to be gendered, at least don't make it aristocratically gendered. It's so weird.
It is really weird.
I hate lady. I really hate it.
I just had
those terms just make no sense to me.
No, definitely. I just had a quick Google, and of course I've got the best source here. Urban Dictionary has working girl. Now, this was submitted in 2003, so it's very current. Working girl, euphemistic term for a prostitute, often preferred by the sex workers themselves. The irony being that person has written the sex workers themselves, and still said that prostitutes prefer working girl. Now,
the answer's in your answer.
It's right there. Now, they've written a little example here in a sentence. She... I don't like being called a whore or a prostitute. He, how would you describe yourself then? She, I'm a working girl. So thanks Urban Dictionary.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, no. Sorry.
It's just...
The next one here on Urban Dictionary. Working girl, a prostitute. Used in a sentence, I felt sick when I learned she was a working girl. Okay, 2004.
Oh, Jesus.
This is good memories, good times. What an age to live in, 2004.
It's just, to me, working woman. It's like employed woman with job.
But it's like, working the streets. She's working the, I don't know, it's working. I think that's where it's sort of,
weird. Courtesan.
Is that not an antidepressant? Courtesan. Just sounds like a type of medication. We're going to prescribe you 100 milligrams of courtesan. Yeah.
We can be very good at making people not depressed.
It's true.
That.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Prescribe.
Maybe I want to use this in my branding.
Yeah. Get yourself 100 milligrams of Jenna Love courtesan. Courtesan. Yeah. Anyway, how do we feel about it? Oh, yuck. It just reminds me of when I used to look into escort agencies. So when I was about 19-ish, I would Google, or 20-ish, I would Google escort agencies in Sydney. And I would always look for ones that had elite courtesans, because I didn't want to be a prostitute. I wanted to be an elite courtesan that had travelled countries and was so educated, even though I'd done none of those things. I really wanted to be the courtesan. And so that was the sort of place I would contact. And they were all normal whores. No, there was no bathhouses and,
Just makes me think of like Moulin Rouge. Okay, I've decided to look up the thesaurus for synonyms for prostitute. I forgot about this one, call girl.
Oh, yeah. I don't think it's very, it's not very Australian, is it? In my experience. It's never been a big one for Aussies.
It's another one I don't understand. Is it because you would call up and get a girl?
Yes.
Is that the...
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, well, it also seems... I mean, no one's making phone. I hope they're not making phone calls anymore.
Ugh, yeah, don't.
Most of us won't allow phone calls.
Do not.
So
block your number.
It also just seems, streetwalker.
That's
one that comes up. Which, we can say street-based sex worker if we want to specify that. Gigolo. Yeah. Does that mean that's like a male sex worker?
Yeah,
right?
a male sex worker historically, and it's
gross.
It does remind me of that movie.
What? Yeah.
It's a very problematic film, but I thought it was Deuce Bigelow, male gigolo. But I laughed. I was young. Okay, I'm allowed to. Don't cancel me.
Oh, yeah, it says noun, male escort. Well, that's interesting.
It's very unbecoming. Like if I was going to hire a male escort and he was advertising himself as a gigolo.
It's not sexy.
Yeah, I'd go, yeah, I'm all right, thanks. It just sort of evokes to me this really European, like smarmy sort of, sorry to anyone European, I don't mean it. But it gives me this idea of like a brand of...
No, it's of that stereotype.
That
character
stereotype,
in a movie, though,
like Deuce Bigelow. Yeah. It just gives me that. It gives me that idea, and I'm like, I want to have sex with a normal person, please, not a stereotype.
Okay, so here's another example, right? I'm looking up synonyms for prostitute in Merriam-Webster, and there are 3 options. So I can look up prostitute as in hooker. I can look up prostitute as in to debauch, or as in to abuse.
Oh, fucking...
So again...
Oof.
Yeah. But some of the examples we haven't... Some of these are great. Tart. I always love to be...
I just tweeted yesterday that I'm a tart.
Like a dessert?
Yeah.
You are a tart, though.
I'm such a tart. Yeah, that's... Yeah.
And like I love custard tarts, so I'm into it all round.
Ew.
Drab? What is that? We ain't drab.
No, we're the opposite. We're glam.
That's weird. This one is cocotte.
Oh.
It's like coquette, but it's not. It's COCOTTE.
Cockot.
I have no idea what that is.
Cockot caught in your throat.
Interesting.
A cockot. A cockot caught. What happened? What happened to you? I went to the doctor. A cockot got cockot in my throat.
No, you're going to say got thought in my throat.
It's very hard, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. Oh my God, babe. There's Chippy.
Barry.
There's Chippy.
Barry from the Chippy.
There's Barry. Barry's in here.
Barry's back.
Barry from the
My
Chippy.
favourite client. I don't want none of
this.
this.
Chippy spelt with a Y and an IE.
None of this Chad Bookington gigolo. We've got Barry from the Chippy. He's back. He knows what I want.
Barry from the Chippy.
Imagine if I tell people I'm a chippy, they'll think I'm a carpenter.
Yeah, that's what chippy means, is it?
Yeah, carpenter. Yeah.
I always get confused. I had a client. I was like, "Oh, what do you do?"
Fuck me.
He was like, "Oh, I'm a chippy," and I was like, "Fuck, I have no idea what that means." And so I just didn't follow that line of questioning.
Oh, that's so bad.
Well, I thought it meant you sold chips at a chip shop.
Oh, babe.
Like I thought he made chips. I'm clueless. What's interesting is there's Doxy, like the vibrator.
Yeah, is this a reliable source though?
It's Merriam-Webster.
Yes,
it's
Prinny
like
says.
No, it's not Oxford, but it's a dictionary.
Yeah.
Like
we're very elitist here about our dictionaries.
This is wild. It had the most concise definitions for the definitions I was looking for before.
Yeah, delightful. Yeah.
Okay, just for some funs, here are the other synonyms for prostitute in different uses. Debauch, corrupt, poison, degrade, deprave, deteriorate, dirty, disgrace, humiliate, weaken, destroy, bastardize, dishonor, demoralize, contaminate, defile, stain, tarnish, blemish, abuse. Oh, I think I said that. Corrupt, degrade, desecrate. Desecrate.
Oh, sorry. Is this? I thought we were listening to the internal monologue of my mother. This is what she sees as a synonym.
Cinnamon. Let's get a cinnamon tart. Done. Anyway, just stop using the P word, man.
Please.
Unless you're one of us,
Yeah.
and then you can do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah.
You can't use the words against other marginalised communities, but you can use ours.
Yeah. Once you join a community, just go fucking wild. Use those words however you like.
Wild.
Like we said too, it is about being an ally and picking your battles and doing all of those things. So in the circumstances where somebody that you genuinely don't think knows, and you can sort of say, oh, don't love that word. I think they prefer the word sex workers. Thanks, we love it. I appreciate the advocacy. If you're in circumstances where that's just going to be a mess, we get it. It's an ongoing journey. And all you can do is your best. And hopefully you've learned something. Or hopefully if we've got one person listening today who has gone, fuck, I've used that word, one of the words that we've said a few times, and has decided that that's not something they're going to do anymore, then we appreciate it. And that's really cool.
But also, making mistakes is all good.
Sure.
It's all about intent.
Fuck yeah, it is.
So just try not to, and that's what matters.
Yeah. There's no, you sent this amazing thing. I actually was talking to Danica the other day. If you have listened to all of our episodes of the podcast, you will know Danica is the most wonderful woman. She was our first guest on the show way, way back in season 1.
She was.
She was. We were talking about intent and about cancellation and about words and language and all of that stuff, because she is trans and a sex worker, so she's a member of a few communities that experience a fair bit of stigma and marginalisation. And I was telling her about this video that you sent recently about people... I'm going to not explain it well, but people who are fighting for causes who then get attacked by people within that cause and then go to the other side because they feel hurt or they feel... It was in relation to the trans movement, the protests and counter protests and all of that sort of stuff happening lately. And I guess the point is that, and Danica and I were talking about, sometimes, people are just trying to do their best. And if we all pile on them and attack them when they say the wrong thing, it just creates enemies, it creates division, it makes people uncomfortable, and it just ruins your fight for the cause. So sometimes, if people mean well and they've just fucked up a little bit, and it's, we've got to, intent is just really important. We would love to thank Australia's sexiest patrons, the ones who would never use...
They're not necessarily Australian. We've covered this.
I keep doing that. Okay. We would like to thank the most politically correct, tactful, wonderful patrons in the world, our patrons. Those with good intent, anyway. Our new very generous somebody, Marcus, thanks for joining us. Our even more generous somebodies, hello, it's me, Alex, Dave, the Ashley Stafford, the Rhiannon Rhodes, Nomad, Adele, Afraz, Andrew, Biggie, our secret admirer, our footstool, Greenie, Lachlan, Leslie, Sub London, Miss Billy, Mr. E,
NK, the Ophelia Parker, Scott C, Simon, Steve, Timmy, Wheezy, Luke, Ellen, Frankie, and Cuddle Koala. And our extremely generous somebodies are Crochet Cat, Aaron, Adam Smith, B&J, Andrew, Pete, Sienna Saint, and Adam Moore.
Thanks, legends.
Thanks so much for listening. We got a bit silly, but I enjoyed it. So
no, it was really good.
You did too.
Good chats, good hangs.
Good hangs. See you next time.
Bye.
Please look out for us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Patreon. Our name everywhere is Somebody You Pod, as in podcast. Our Patreon starts at just $3 a month, and you can get all of our episodes ad-free and a day early, plus bonus episodes, behind-the-scenes action, bloopers, and more. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the voices of sex workers. And remember, somebody you love might just be a sex worker.